"Who did this to
Where
you?"
is the
said the
amulet?
Vampire King.
Tell me now.
By evening, every man in the
I
city
told you,
feared for his
I don't
life.
know where he hid it.
Lanterns flickered against the storm, their weak light trembling like candle flames in the wind. The city, ancient and full of secrets, had always been a place where whispers could travel farther than footsteps. Tonight, those whispers carried fear. Lyra ran. Her shoes slipped on the wet stones, and the hem of her cloak clung to her legs like wet ivy. Her heart pounded so loudly, it seemed the city itself might hear it. Behind her, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the empty alleyways. She dared not look back, yet every instinct told her that whoever chased her was relentless, merciless. She reached a narrow passage and pressed herself against the wall, chest heaving. Rain ran down her face, mingling with tears she had no strength left to hide. She didn't know why they wanted her, only that the masked men had come from nowhere, attacking without words. She had tried to escape, to hide, but they had been faster, stronger. And now she was alone, soaked, terrified, and utterly exposed. Then she saw him. He was standing at the end of the alley, tall, immovable like a shadow drawn from the night itself. The storm seemed to bow around him, the rain falling in a halo he did not touch. His clothes were dark, his hair black as a raven's wing, and his eyes glowed faintly under the hood of his cloak, red and golden and terrible. Lyra froze. For a moment, the fear inside her was replaced by awe. Whoever this was, he was not human, or if he was, he carried the weight of something ancient, something that had seen centuries pass like hours. "You should not be here," he said, his voice low and smooth, yet it carried authority, like a command that could not be denied. I didn't mean to," Lyra stammered. Her voice cracked, and she realized she was shivering not from the rain, but from the intensity of his gaze. "You are hurt," he said, stepping closer. His boots made no sound on the wet stones. Lyra flinched. "Yes," she whispered, pressing a hand to her arm where bruises already bloomed. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice sharp, not cruel, but filled with a weight that made her stomach twist. Lyra opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She didn't know. The men had come like shadows, vanished like smoke before she could see their faces. And yet this stranger, she felt somehow that he would not let her lie. I don't know," she admitted, voice barely audible. "They came from nowhere." The stranger studied her silently, his eyes moving over her face, her clothes, her trembling hands. Then he nodded once decisively. "Come with me," he said. "You are not safe here." Lyra hesitated. Something inside her whispered to run, to hide, to keep herself safe. But her legs refused to move. They were frozen by the magnetism of his presence. Slowly, she allowed him to guide her, one strong hand lightly on her elbow, leading her through the maze of streets, past empty marketplaces and shuttered windows. They arrived at the gates of a fortress she had only heard of in fearful tales. Black stone towers rose into the stormy sky, adorned with spires and gargoyles that seemed to watch her approach. Lightning split the clouds, illuminating the structure in stark white flashes. Lyra's breath caught. She had thought this place existed only in stories, yet here it was, alive, forbidding, and impossibly beautiful. The stranger opened the gates without a word. The doors creaked as they swung inward, revealing a courtyard where the rain was softer, almost still, as if the fortress itself repelled the storm. Inside, the atmosphere changed. Candles flickered along the walls, and the air smelled of ancient stone, iron, and something faintly sweet that she could not name. Servants in dark robes moved quietly, avoiding the stranger's gaze. Lyra felt as though she had stepped into a different world, one governed by rules she did not understand. He led her through halls lined with portraits of men and women whose eyes seemed to follow her. Their expressions were severe, regal, and in some, a hint of sadness lingered like old ghosts trapped on canvas. Finally, they reached a room with a fire burning in a tall hearth. He released her arm and studied her, tilting his head slightly, as if weighing the truth of her story against something only he could see. "You are weak but not broken," he said finally. And yet, there is a fire in you, small but stubborn. You will need it if you are to survive here." Lyra shivered, not from the cold but from the intensity of his gaze. I don't belong here," she whispered. "You belong nowhere that is safe," he said. "But you belong to life, and that is enough, for now." The fire cast flickering shadows on his face, and she noticed the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw. He was beautiful in a terrifying way, like a storm made human, but she sensed something deeper, older, something that carried both danger and grief. Why help me?" she asked, finally finding her voice. "Because no one else will," he said, stepping closer. She could feel his presence like heat and shadow at once. "Because they will not stop. Because I do not forgive easily, and I do not forget." Lyra swallowed. There was a quiet intensity to his words that made her skin prickle. She wanted to ask more questions, but she knew they would be answered in time, or perhaps never. For the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of safety. The fear did not vanish, but it softened, tempered by the knowledge that this man, this creature, had seen her at her weakest and had chosen to intervene. Hours passed in silence. The storm outside raged on, but inside the fire crackled softly, a small island of warmth and light. Lyra curled in a chair by the hearth, exhausted and yet unable to rest fully. She kept glancing at him, the shadowed figure who had saved her, wondering who he truly was and what price he might demand for his protection. Finally, he spoke, his voice breaking the silence like a bell tolling in the dark. "Do you understand what you have stepped into?" he asked. "The city, it is not yours. The streets do not belong to the living alone, and those who sought you tonight, they are not the worst you will meet." Lyra shook her head, too tired to speak. "You must learn quickly," he continued. "If you are to survive, you must know that strength alone is not enough. Fear can be a weapon, pain can be a shield, and trust can be a dangerous thing." She nodded, though she did not fully understand. She only knew that she had no choice but to follow him, to accept this dark, dangerous world she had stumbled into. As the night deepened, he moved to the window, looking out over the city. The storm had begun to abate, leaving streets glistening and slick under the pale light of the moon. Lyra watched him, captivated by the stillness and the quiet intensity of his presence. And then, a sound, soft, deliberate, almost impossible to detect, reached her ears. A shadow detached itself from the rooftops across the city, moving with purpose. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She looked at the man beside her, who did not turn, did not speak, yet she could feel that he had noticed it too. "Someone watches us," she whispered. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said, "and they know more than you or I can guess. The night is not yet over, and the city has its secrets. Some of them are dangerous, and some of them, even, I fear." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine, but it was not the cold. It was the weight of the unknown, the feeling that everything she had known, everything she had trusted, was about to change. The Vampire King turned from the window, his eyes locking onto hers with a weight that made her knees weak. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow the city will speak, and we must listen. For tonight you are mine to protect." Lyra nodded, unsure if she understood the meaning of his words. She wanted to speak, to ask him questions, but the exhaustion claimed her, dragging her into a restless sleep. Outside, the city breathed in shadows and whispers. Somewhere across the rooftops, the figure waited, watching, silent, knowing. And inside the fortress, the Vampire King stood alone by the fire, a storm within his chest as fierce as the one that had passed outside. He whispered to himself, though Lyra could not hear the words, "Who did this to you, and will they pay for it?" The night stretched on, thick and heavy with promise and threat, as the city slept unaware of the darkness that had settled upon it. The first light of dawn barely touched the black towers of the fortress. Inside, shadows lingered in corners like memories that refused to die. Lyra awoke on a soft bed, the warmth of the fire still clinging to her skin. Her body ached, and her mind felt heavy with dreams of rain and footsteps, of masked figures chasing her through dark streets. She remembered him, Caliph, the vampire king, standing over her, his presence immense, his eyes glowing in the firelight. For a moment she feared the morning would strip him away, like smoke dispersing in the wind. But when she opened her eyes, he was still there, seated across the room, watching. "You are awake," he said, voice calm, carrying a weight that made the air thick. "Good. Rest will not save you for long." Lyra pulled the blanket closer around herself, unsure whether she should feel comforted or intimidated. "Why? Why do you help me?" she asked again, though the words sounded small in the vast room. Caliph leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on his knees. "Because I saw you in pain and because someone dared to strike where they should not have," he said. "That is enough reason for me, and because the city needs balance." Lyra frowned. "Balance? What does that mean?" "The city is alive," he said softly. "It breathes through its streets, through its people, and through the shadows that linger where the living dare not go. There are forces here that would devour anyone who steps unprepared. You are unprepared." She shivered at his words, though she could not tell if it was fear or awe. She wanted to run from the fortress, from this man, from the weight of his presence. Yet something inside her whispered that running would do no good. Caliph rose and moved toward the tall window, looking out over the city that gleamed wet and silver under the morning light. "Today, you will learn about survival," he said. "Not with weapons, not with strength, but with knowledge. The city watches and the city remembers." Lyra followed him hesitantly, her eyes wide at the grandeur of the halls. The walls were lined with portraits of men and women who seemed to stare from beyond the ages. Tapestries hung like rivers of color, and chandeliers of black iron twisted overhead. The air smelled of old stone, wax, and something sweet, faint, almost hypnotic. "This place, it is beautiful," she said, almost to herself. "It is older than most living beings," Caliph replied. "It has seen empires rise and fall. It holds power in every brick. And it protects when it wishes to." Lyra noticed the servants moving silently in the halls. Their eyes were careful, respectful, and occasionally fearful. Caliph seemed to command not only attention but obedience. It was as if the fortress itself bent to his will. "You must meet the court," he said. "They will judge your presence whether you belong or not." Lyra's stomach tightened. She had no desire to be judged, no desire to meet the council of vampires and mortals that served him, but she knew she had no choice. The court chamber was massive, with a high vaulted ceiling and walls that glimmered with silver accents. Around a long table sat figures cloaked in shadows, their eyes fixed on her the moment she entered. Some were pale, some were older, and others looked almost human, but none smiled. Caliph stepped forward and spoke, his voice ringing through the room. "She is here because she was attacked. She is not our enemy." A tall figure with gray hair and sharp features leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And why should we trust her? The city is full of spies and pretenders. How do we know she is not a pawn?" Lyra swallowed, her voice trembling. I don't know who attacked me. I was running." "Please, I only want to live." Another figure, younger with dark hair and golden eyes, studied her closely. "She is frightened," he said softly. "That much is clear, but fear can hide strength or weakness." Caliph's gaze cut the room. "She has a gift. And that gift may save us all or destroy us." The council murmured among themselves, and Lyra felt their weight like stones pressing down on her. She did not understand what he meant by gift, and the thought made her nervous. What if she was dangerous? What if she had already doomed herself by surviving the attack? Caliph turned to her. "You will stay here. You will learn. You will understand. And if you survive, you will be stronger than you can imagine." For the next hours, Lyra was led through the fortress, learning about the history of the city, the rules of the court, and the delicate balance that Caliph maintained. She discovered that the city had always been a crossroads for dark forces, that vampires, humans, and other beings had lived in careful tension. Any disturbance could tip that balance, causing chaos. Caliph watched her closely, correcting her missteps, guiding her understanding, but always with a subtle tension that made her heart beat faster. There was power in him, raw and commanding, and yet he seemed both patient and impatient with her. As evening approached, Caliph brought her to a high balcony overlooking the city. The streets were quiet now, lit only by the soft glow of lanterns and the reflection of moonlight on the wet cobblestones. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, his voice low. "The city, it whispers, even when it is silent." Lyra nodded. "It feels alive, almost like it is watching me." "Exactly," he said. "And if it watches, it remembers. Your attackers, they were only the beginning. Someone is moving in the shadows. Someone who knows much more than they should." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. "Will they come again?" "They may," Caliph said. His eyes softened for the first time just slightly. "But you are not alone, not while I stand." They stood in silence, the wind carrying the scent of rain and the city below. Lyra felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. She did not understand him fully, yet she sensed that he had seen into something deep inside her, something that even she had not known existed. Later, in the great dining hall, the council gathered again. Lyra noticed the tension between them, the way some of them cast wary glances at Caliph, as if questioning his judgment. She realized that even he, the king, was not free from scrutiny. Power was never absolute and trust was even rarer. During the meal, Caliph leaned toward her. "Do not be afraid of them," he said quietly. "Fear will make you weak. Observation, patience, those will make you strong." Lyra nodded, trying to memorize his words. There was a strange clarity in them, even amid the fear that churned in her stomach. She wanted to be brave, to show him that she could be more than prey. After the council dispersed, Caliph led her back to the balcony. The city stretched before them, dark and endless like a living painting. "Tomorrow you will begin your training," he said. "Not with swords or spells, but with understanding. You must see what others cannot. You must feel what others ignore. That is how you will survive." Lyra's heart pounded. She did not know if she was ready, yet something inside her stirred. Perhaps for the first time she believed she might have a chance. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why not someone stronger?" Caliph looked at her, his gaze both gentle and piercing. "Strength is not always what saves you. Sometimes it is courage, and sometimes it is the ability to see the truth when others are blind." The night deepened around them, stars hidden by clouds and rain. Lyra felt the wind brush her face, carrying both danger and promise. She realized she had entered a world she could not escape from, a world of shadows, secrets, and ancient power. And in that world the vampire king watched over her, a presence both terrifying and comforting. Then, a faint movement caught her eye. Across the city rooftops, a shadow shifted. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She knew, without understanding how, that someone was watching her again. Someone who would not rest until they discovered the truth about her, about Caliph, about the power that had been awakened by her survival. Caliph noticed her glance and followed it. His expression hardened. "They are close," he said, "and they know more than we think. You must be ready. Fear is inevitable, but you cannot let it control you." Lyra swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. The city was alive and it was dangerous. And she was at the center of it all, whether she wanted to be or not. The vampire king's eyes softened and he stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow begins the real trial, and you will not face it alone." Lyra nodded, exhaustion and anticipation mixing in her chest. She wanted to sleep, but sleep would not come easily. The shadow on the rooftops remained, silent and patient, a reminder that the night was never truly safe, and that the city held secrets far darker than she could imagine. And somewhere in the distance, a soft whisper of wind carried a warning. The games of power were just beginning, and the city streets would soon run with more than rain. The night had grown colder, wrapping the fortress in a silence that felt almost sacred. Lyra wandered the corridors, trying to make sense of everything she had learned in the past days. The whispered histories of the city, the strict hierarchies of Calith's court, and the shadows that seemed to move even when no one was near. Her mind was a storm of confusion, fear, and curiosity. She had sensed the city watching her, and now, more than ever, she felt that something within her stirred in response to that attention. Caliph had mentioned a gift, a power that could be dangerous if uncontrolled, and yet it was the one thing that could protect her. She did not understand it, not fully, but she knew, instinctively, that it was tied to her bloodline. Caliph appeared silently at the end of the hall. His presence was sudden but never startling. She had grown used to his ability to appear as if the shadows themselves had carried him. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice low, carrying authority. "Especially tonight." I needed to think," Lyra replied. Her voice was soft, but it held determination. "Everything is so overwhelming, I don't know what is happening to me." Caliph stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You are discovering the truth about who you are. That truth has power, and power attracts attention. Do you understand?" Lyra nodded, though the weight of his words made her stomach tighten. "I think so, but it scares me." "Good," he said, a shadow of a smile flickering across his face. "Fear sharpens the mind. Fear makes you alert, but you must not let it rule you. Tomorrow we will begin your training. You will learn to control what is awakening inside you." Before Lyra could respond, the walls of the fortress seemed to pulse, faint and almost imperceptible. She paused, feeling the strange sensation rise in her chest. A chill ran down her spine, and for the first time she realized her gift was not just potential, it was already stirring. Caliph noticed her pause and narrowed his eyes. "You felt it?" "Yes," she whispered. "Something inside me, something moved." "That is the beginning," he said, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "But it is also dangerous. If those who watch the city sense it, they will come for you." Lyra shivered, thinking of the shadowed figure that had followed her before. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. "Why was I chosen for this?" Caliph looked away toward the city, his expression unreadable. "Because your bloodline is old, and because it carries a curse or a blessing. That is yet to be decided." Lyra's heart raced. Curse? Blessing? She did not understand, but something deep within her whispered that her past had already caught up with her. The next morning, Caliph led her to the fortress's training halls. The walls were lined with mirrors that reflected her every movement, forcing her to see herself not as she felt, but as she truly was. Caliph stood beside her, guiding her movements with precision, but never touching. His eyes were everywhere, watching for even the smallest sign of hesitation or fear. "You must learn to sense before you see, to understand before you act," he said. "The city will test you, as will those who envy or fear you. Control is your shield. Awareness is your weapon." Lyra tried to follow his instructions, focusing on the faint sensations in her chest, on the whispers in the wind that carried more than just sound. At first, she felt clumsy, weak, and exposed. But gradually, she began to feel a rhythm in the chaos, a pulse in the city that responded to her attention. It was subtle at first, but undeniable. By evening, she was exhausted, but she could sense the edges of the city differently. She could feel the currents of power flowing through its streets, the unseen eyes watching from rooftops, and the echoes of whispered intentions that floated on the wind. Caliph observed her silently, nodding once in approval. "You are learning faster than I expected," he said. "But this is only the beginning. What you feel now is small. Soon, it will demand more of you, and you must be ready." As they walked through the fortress corridors, Lyra could not shake the feeling that something had changed within her. Her awareness of the world had deepened, and yet it brought unease. She realized that the city was not just alive, it was conscious, and it was aware of her presence, her bloodline, and her awakening power. That night, Caliph took her to a hidden chamber deep beneath the fortress. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of earth and old stone. Candles flickered along the walls, illuminating runes carved into the floors and ceiling. Lyra's eyes widened. "What is this place?" she whispered. "This is where the bloodlines of the city are kept," Caliph said, "and where their secrets are revealed. You will learn the truth about yourself tonight." Lyra's heart pounded. She had waited for answers, but fear had made her hesitate. Now, standing in the chamber, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Caliph gestured for her to sit on a stone platform at the center of the room. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Focus on your blood, on the pulse of your life. Feel it connect to the city, to the fortress, to everything around you. Let it speak to you." Lyra obeyed, closing her eyes and taking deep, steadying breaths. At first, there was nothing. Then faintly she felt something stir, a whisper of movement within her, a connection to the walls, to the stones, to the city itself. It was frightening, yet exhilarating. "Good," Caliph said, his voice calm but urgent. "Now listen. The city will tell you its secrets. Some of them are warnings, some are truths long hidden. Pay attention." Lyra concentrated, and slowly, images and sensations began to flow through her mind. She saw shadows moving in the streets, heard distant voices whispering warnings, and felt the pull of ancient forces that had slumbered for centuries. Among them, she sensed a presence that was familiar and terrifying. Someone had orchestrated her attack, someone who understood the city's power and feared what she might become. Her chest tightened, and a vision appeared, a masked figure standing on a rooftop, watching her even now. She gasped, opening her eyes to look at Caliph. "They are here," she whispered. Caliph's expression darkened. "Yes," he said, "they are closer than you think, and they know more than we realized. Your awakening has drawn their attention." Lyra's fear surged, but Caliph placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Do not panic. You are stronger than you believe. You will learn to use this power, and you will not face them alone." The rest of the night passed in a blur of training and focus. Caliph guided her through exercises to channel her gift, teaching her to sense the presence of others, to feel intention, and to understand the subtle currents of energy that flowed through the city. By the time the first light of dawn crept into the chamber, Lyra was exhausted but transformed. She had felt her power awaken fully for the first time, and though it frightened her, she also sensed the potential for strength beyond her imagining. Caliph studied her carefully. "You are ready," he said quietly, "but readiness is only the first step. The city will test you, and so will your enemies." Lyra nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and fear. I will do whatever it takes." Caliph's eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained guarded. "Good, because soon there will be no more time for preparation. The shadow that watches you, it will act, and when it does, you must be able to protect yourself and me." As they left the chamber, the fortress felt different. The walls seemed alive with anticipation, the air thick with expectation. Lyra realized that the danger was not just outside. It was within the very fabric of the city, in the currents of power that had always existed but had been invisible to her until now. That evening, as they walked along the balcony overlooking the city, Lyra noticed movement on the rooftops again. The shadow had grown bolder, closer, and more deliberate. Her pulse quickened, and she felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Caliph's hand brushed hers briefly, a gesture that was both comforting and electrifying. "They are patient," he said softly, "but patience will end soon, and when it does, you must be ready to face what comes." Lyra nodded, gripping the balcony railing as if to steady herself. She did not yet understand the full extent of her power, nor the dangers that awaited her. But one thing was certain: her life had changed forever. The city, the vampire king, and the shadow that watched her were all bound to her fate now. And deep in the darkness, beyond the fortress walls, a plan was already unfolding, a plan that would test her courage, her strength, and the bond she shared with Caliph. The city was quiet that night, but the calm was only a mask. Beneath the shadows of the rooftops, plans long in motion stirred to life. Lyra stood at the balcony of the fortress, her cloak tugged tightly around her shoulders. The wind tugged at her hair, whipping it across her face, but she barely noticed. Her senses were alert, stretched thin by the energy flowing through her. Caliph appeared silently behind her, his presence grounding her in a way that no other could. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Lyra turned, meeting his gaze. There was no fear in her eyes now, only determination. "I think I am," she said. "I have to be. Whatever comes, I cannot run anymore." Caliph nodded. "Good, because they are coming." The shadow she had sensed for days now moved with purpose across the city. It was closer than ever, its intent clear. This was no longer observation, this was action. Whoever had orchestrated her attack, whoever had manipulated her bloodline, was stepping into the open. They descended into the halls of the fortress, moving swiftly through corridors lined with portraits of those who had ruled before Caliph. Each image seemed to whisper warnings, lessons of power and betrayal. Lyra's heart pounded, but the fear that had once consumed her was replaced by focus. She could feel the city's pulse, the flow of energy that connected all things, guiding her. In the central chamber, Caliph summoned the council. Their eyes were wary, but even they recognized the urgency of the moment. The masked figure had been discovered, and the city itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. "This is not a fight of swords alone," Caliph told them. "This is a battle of awareness, of understanding the currents that flow beneath the streets. Lyra's power can protect us or destroy us. We must act wisely." Lyra felt the weight of his words. She had grown strong in the past days, but she knew the danger was immense. The masked figure was cunning, patient, and had anticipated every move. This would test not only her skill but her courage and her trust in Caliph. As they prepared, the fortress trembled faintly, as if responding to the tension outside. Lyra closed her eyes and let herself sense the currents of the city, the threads of energy that connected the streets, the rooftops, and the hearts of the people within it. She could feel the shadow approaching, cold and deliberate, its intent sharp as a knife. Caliph stepped close, his hand brushing hers. "Trust yourself," he whispered. "Trust the city and trust me." The words were simple, yet they carried weight. Lyra nodded. Together they moved to the balcony once more. Below, the streets were empty, but the shadows whispered of movement. The figure was close, drawing on the darkness as if it belonged to them. Suddenly, the air shifted. A wave of cold swept through the courtyard, and Lyra's senses flared. She could feel the presence before she saw it, a ripple of power that made her pulse quicken. The masked figure emerged from the shadows, their form tall and commanding. They carried an aura of ancient knowledge, and Lyra recognized with a chill that they knew more about her than she did herself. "You have grown strong," the figure said, voice smooth and cold. "But strength alone will not save you. You are tied to a fate you cannot escape." Lyra squared her shoulders. "I will face my fate," she said, "and I will not be afraid." Caliph's presence was beside her, steady and unwavering. "You are not alone," he said, "and together we will end this." The shadowed figure moved with incredible speed, descending toward the fortress. Lyra felt the energy around her pulse in response. She closed her eyes, letting her gift guide her, channeling the currents of the city through her veins. A warmth spread from her chest, a fire that she had not felt before. The figure struck, their movements precise and controlled, but Lyra anticipated the attack. She reached out with her senses, extending her awareness to the very stones beneath her feet. A wave of energy surged, and the figure staggered slightly, caught off guard by the force of her awakening. Caliph moved with her, his power complementing hers. Together, they became a single force, connected by trust and the energy of the city itself. The figure struck again, but Lyra's awareness allowed her to predict every movement. She met each strike with control, channeling her power to defend and to redirect, turning the attack back on the one who sought to harm them. "You underestimate her," Caliph said, voice low but fierce. "And that will be your mistake." The figure's mask reflected the moonlight, hiding their expression, but Lyra could sense their frustration. They had expected fear, confusion, hesitation, and instead they found strength, focus, and resolve. "You cannot control what you do not understand," Lyra said, her voice steady. "And I understand more than you think." Energy rippled through the courtyard as she extended her gift, reaching into the currents of the city. The stones under their feet hummed with power, and the figure faltered, sensing the connection they could not break. Lyra's focus was absolute. She could feel the fortress responding, the city itself lending strength to her cause. Caliph moved closer, his hand brushing hers in a silent gesture of unity. Their bond, formed through trust, danger, and shared purpose, amplified the power flowing through them. The shadowed figure realized, too late, that they had underestimated not only Lyra, but the bond between the vampire king and the girl who had once been prey. A final surge of energy emanated from Lyra, controlled and precise. The figure was thrown back, landing on the stones below, their movements halted. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the wind whispering through the towers. Caliph's eyes, glowing faintly, met hers. "You did well," he said, voice calm but proud. "You have embraced your power, and you have proven your courage." Lyra, breathing heavily, realized that the fear she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a clarity she had never known. The city was still alive around them, watching, acknowledging her strength. The shadowed figure rose slowly, removing their mask to reveal a face lined with age and cunning. "This is not over," they said softly. "But you have changed the game. I will return." Lyra did not flinch. "And I will be ready," she said. "We will be ready." Caliph stepped beside her, his presence steadying, comforting, and commanding all at once. "Let them come," he said. "We have faced the storm and survived. Together, nothing can break us." For the first time since her attack, Lyra felt a sense of completeness. She had discovered her power, faced her fear, and learned to trust not only herself but Caliph, the vampire king who had guided her through shadows. The city, vast and ancient, had revealed its currents to her, and she had learned to ride them with precision and awareness. They returned to the fortress, the night air crisp and quiet. Lyra knew the battle was only one step in a long path, but the lesson was clear. She was no longer a victim, no longer prey. She was a force, alive with potential and ready to face the dangers of the city with courage and resolve. In the quiet of the fortress, Caliph and Lyra stood together, looking out over the city that had shaped them, tested them, and ultimately bound them together. Their bond was no longer merely of survival, it was of trust, respect, and shared purpose. "Thank you," Lyra said softly, "for everything, for protecting me and for believing in me." Caliph's expression softened. "You did the hard work," he said. "I only guided you. The strength was always yours." For a moment, the weight of the past weeks lifted. The storm, the fear, the uncertainty, they had passed, leaving only clarity, purpose, and a bond that neither shadows nor enemies could break. The city below continued its quiet life, unaware of the battle that had unfolded, unaware of the power that now flowed through Lyra. But she did not mind. She knew the shadows would return, the threats would come again. And next time she would be ready, not alone but with Caliph, her guide, protector, and ally. As the first light of dawn touched the towers, Caliph whispered, "No one will harm you again, not while I stand." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest, a fire that was hers alone, unshakable and true. "Together," she said, her voice firm, "we are untouchable." Above them the city stirred in silence, ancient and knowing. The currents of power flowed beneath the streets, through the shadows, and into the hearts of those who watched. And Lyra, for the first time, felt at home, not in safety, but in strength, in knowledge, and in the bond that had transformed her from prey into a force that even darkness itself would respect. The shadowed figure, far across the city, paused on a rooftop. They watched, silent and patient, knowing that the battle had been lost this night but understanding that the game was not over. Lyra and Caliph had proven themselves, but the city's currents were endless, and the shadows never slept. And so, the night ended with fire and redemption, courage and transformation, leaving the city to breathe in the dawn of a new era. A city that had witnessed fear, survived chaos, and found hope in the bond between a vampire king and the girl who had become more than she had ever imagined.